Welcome everyone to this week's webinar. Today we are going to be talking about formatting visuals within Power BI. And let me just give you a quick look here at what types of things we're covering. There are enough customization options and formatting options within Power BI that you could practically write a novel if you wanted to cover each and individual one. Today, we're going to be looking at some of the more basic ones that can be used across multiple types of visuals and things that really can take your report from, okay, looks good, the data's there, just to that little more professional, polished level where you can start seeing those aesthetics really come together. I know a lot of people, when using Power BI, it's the meat and potatoes. Let's get connected to the data. Let's get the charts we want on there, how we want to analyze our data, which is definitely super important. And that's always the first thing I would have someone do when making a Power BI report. But I always like to have people take some time to think about that overall aesthetic design of your reports. Especially if you're going to have multiple Power BI reports, it's helpful to have a consistent overall format for how your reports will look, whether that's using Pantone colors for a company or just a consistent borders or how the reports are laid out or how they're titled or named, things like that. It is definitely something worth spending the time to look at and to figure out for your organization. So here I've listed the different things that we're going to be looking at from the formatting. We're going to be renaming fields. We're going to use titles and look at backgrounds and borders. We're going to look at the data, information, some tooltips, the format painter, and then one thing that we are going to look at specifically are your slicer selection options. So slicers are your filters that you can use to make an interactive filter experience within Power BI, and we're going to take a look at those options. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the demo. Okay. So here we've got a Power BI report that I've just put together, just an example report. I connected to a couple sales tables and I created a few different visuals. Doesn't look bad, but we can make it look better. So the first thing we're going to look at is the naming on the visuals. So what you can see here is when Power BI pulls data over from whether it's GP or a CRM system or any system, it is going to pull over the schema name. So you can see like we're seeing this XTND price for extended price, things in caps. And although you can figure some of them out, you may want to have them named more conventional or what your end users of your report would be looking for. So let's go ahead. We're going to start with our two slicers here. And anytime you want to take action on a visual, you want to make sure that you do select it so the brackets are around it. And we can see over here, this is the information. Sales territory is what we're pulling from. And to rename this within a visual, we're going to click the arrow here and we're going to rename. The reason that I like to do it here versus maybe renaming the field itself or renaming it on like the Power Query editor is I do like to keep those schema names so I can understand what field specifically is feeding this data, or if I wanted to go back and look at the data within GP or on the SQL server, I know exactly what I'm looking for. So let's go ahead and start renaming some fields here. And then I'm just going to go through my visuals. And this one actually is cut off a little bit, so I'm going to extend this one out too so we can see the whole name there. And I'm going to do this for each one. So now we're looking at a visual that has more than one field on it. So we're going to rename each one. And you can name it whatever you want. It can be just putting its official name, like I changed, the LOCN code to location. You can also, if you want to put like a column name that doesn't have anything to do with it, you certainly can. It can be whatever you want. I'm just going to say price to keep this one small. And even though it says quantity here, I'm going to rename it just because I want only the first letter capitalized. If you're going to be using a field a lot within your reports, and you're always going to want it to have a different name, you may want to change the field name over here within the field list. So if you come over here, like with document amount, if we click the three dots here, the ellipsis, you can rename it here as well, and then the field will always have that name. So if you're going to be using it frequently across multiple pages, you may want to rename it there instead. If you only have a few visuals that you're renaming it, or you're doing something like a table and you want to have, this is our year-to-date shipped name, I don't know, whatever it could be, however long you want it to be, then renaming it here within the individual visual makes more sense. So that really is how you're looking to use the field as to where you may want to rename it. And then I'm going to do my table here. Okay. Almost done. This is the longest part of everything we're going to do just because we're doing it on all of them. Okay, and this one also looks like not all our data is showing up because we made some of the titles longer. So I'm going to shrink my map there, and I'm going to pull this over so we can see more of it. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Perfect. So now we've renamed the fields, and you can see that some of our visuals have automatically come with a title. So this shows price and quantity by location. It's pulling those titles directly from the type of data that you've placed on a visual. Not all visuals will come over with the title automatically appearing on the visual. You can see with our table, we have column headers, but not a title to the table. So let's go ahead and we're going to look at titles. Most of your customization and formatting options are going to be here on this paint roller for each of your visuals. And this is where you can see there's a ton of different options for each visual. But again, we're only going to look at some of the more common ones. And for this one, we are looking for title. You can see that the slider is on. If it was off, it's just a matter of clicking it to turn it on and off. And when you expand title, you can change the text. So this, maybe I just want to say price. I don't want to define, well, it's by location or by quantity, because we can see location on the bottom, price here on the side. You also, with your titles, can change the font color. So maybe I want let's do a white font because we're going to do a dark border. So I want white font. In the background color, I'm going to select color, and I want this to be a nice dark blue. You can also change the alignment, and you can adjust the size as well. If at any time within any of the formatting you've made changes and you just don't like how it looks and you want to go back to ground zero, they have a revert to default option here. And that is the same for any of the different formatting customizations that you make. But we're going to say we like the way this title looks. And we're going to go over here and we're going to just change this title. And on this one, we're just going to say sales amount. And we're going to leave this one with no background, or we're just going to leave it black just so you can see some of the different options with titles. We already have a price by state. We'll leave that one alone. And we'll add a title here to our table. So we're going to go ahead and turn that on, and we're going to just say sales transactions. And we'll go ahead and make this one white, and we'll put that dark on it and put that in the middle. Okay, so we can see we've added some titles, and we're just going to look at some different ways to format, and then I'll show you how you can make it consistent here at the end, but we're just going to go through the different options here. Along with backgrounds for titles like we've done, you can give the overall visual a background, or you can give the overall page a background. So if you want your visual to have a background, I'm gonna go back to the paint roller here, and I can actually see that background was on, and you determine a color. So just so we can take a look at what it looks like, I'm gonna give it a pink color. Transparency is 0%, and you can pull it all the way to 100% transparent so you don't see it. So you can give it a different shade depending on how transparent you want it. This can be helpful to pop visuals off the screen if you want. I don't use the visual background a ton, but it is something that some people have really liked using. So let's go ahead. We're going to get rid of this and change it back to white, and I'm going to turn the background off. If you wanted to change the entire page background, I have nothing selected, so I just clicked here on my canvas where there isn't a visual. I don't have brackets around anything. And if I click the paint roller, this is the page formatting options. So I could go to page background, and I could apply, say I want light gray, and let's pull it in here. And you can see that it starts to give a background around all your visuals. I do not see this used a lot, but it has been used here and there. Okay, so that is backgrounds. Another thing that you can do to help define the space of your visuals or kind of make them pop off a page is borders and shadows. So let's go ahead and select this price chart. And border and shadow, they're right here next to each other. So let's go ahead and turn on the border, and I'm going to expand it. You can customize the color of the border that you might want. So maybe we want it to be that same color theme as we have with the title background. And then you can give it a radius. So you see when it has 0 radius, it's a nice square border. But if we go here and say we want to give it 12, you can see how it starts to round those edges for us. Kind of starts to look like a Monopoly card the way I formatted it, but hey, if that's your jam, we'll use it. We're going to look at this one, the sales amount one. We're going to apply a shadow to this one. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to turn shadow on. And let's expand the options here on shadow. So you can see it's already applied the shadow. It defaults with the black color. If we wanted to change it to that dark blue, you can see some shift within the hue there. You can also choose the position if you want it inside, so it looks more popped off the page. I guess they both look popped off the page, but this one looks more rounded towards the outside. Or if you have it inside, oops, shadow here, then it looks like it's coming right off the page that way. You can also have it preset. It presets to the bottom right, but you can also choose where the majority of the shadow appears. So you can change the position of it as well. I personally happen to like the ones on the inside where they kind of look like they're sitting right up off the screen like little buttons. Okay. Borders and shadows. The other thing that you can change is your data and colors. So you see that we just have a default blue for each of these bars with the darker blue for the line graph. You can change your individual data colors. So we're going to start with this price chart that I've got. I'm going to go back to formatting here, and I'm going to expand data colors. So you can see that you have quantity default color, and then this is what we're seeing for the price. And if you expand this, you can pick from the colors here. You can also create a custom color. So if you have Pantone colors for your organization, if you do custom color, you can try and find one individual one within this entire square, or you can get the number for the color. For this one, just so we can take a look at it, we're going to go ahead, we're going to change it, the line to kind of a pink. And let's change this one over to a dark purple. So you can change things individually like this. There also are different themes that are already preset within the system. So if we go to the View tab, you can see these are the most common themes that people use within Power BI. And if we hit the little down arrow, it shows all of your readily available themes in here. So you can see the current theme we're on is just the default theme that Power BI has. But there's a bunch of other ones. If you do like Bloom here, you can see it changes the background. I don't really like this one, but you can see a couple of them do change the background. This one as well changes the page background, and then the different data bars. You can see because we changed this one and we completely put the background of the visual to 100% transparent, it fades right into the background of the page. A common one that I suggest people use is this colorblind safe theme, just because a lot of times you don't know if people are colorblind or not. And this is a theme that does choose colors that are a little safer to use. If people are colorblind, they still can tell those differences. If you change a theme, you can see that, this chart here has the darker ones. This one that we changed to that dark purple and pink, it has made adjustments, but still kept it different. So it did maintain at least some of the customization for this visual that we changed. If we went back to the default theme we were using when we changed that, it does retain those same colors that we changed to. But I'm going to go ahead and change this one to colorblind safe because that's one I create most of my reports on, just to be sure. Another thing that you can add that we're going to look at today is data labels. So you can see if we hover over any point on a chart, you can see the price on this is the 374,000. If we get to the data point for the quantity, it's 485. But if people like to see that number without having to hover over it, we can add data labels. So I'm going to go ahead back to the Format tab, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on data labels. With data labels, when we expand it, they will always default to an auto units. So what you see here is we have 0.37 million, 0.00 million. A lot of times I am going to change this to none. You also can delineate what you would like it to use for units. So if everything's in millions, you could have it all on millions and it would always have that M, billions, trillions. I like to do none, and then we see the full number. You can also change decimal places. So a lot of things people don't always necessarily need to see the cents, but they do like to see, if it's 2,000 or if it's 300,000, they do want to see the actual number. So you can define how many decimal places you want it to show. The common one I use is I do not select units, I have none for units, and I change it to 0 for decimal places so that the report doesn't look too cluttered. You can also change orientation. And with the position, you can change where it appears. A lot of times I do leave that one a little more automatic, but you can choose where it's going to appear within the visual itself. You can also change the text size and the font family. You can choose a background color for the data labels as well, similar to how you do for titles. I don't do that a ton. I usually leave them as just white, but you can choose the background color and transparency as well. And again, you can always revert to default. If you made a bunch of changes, you're like, I can't figure out how to get it back, we can revert to default, and you could always start again. We're just going to keep this pretty simple. We're going to have no units and 0 decimal places. Tooltips is another common formatting. It's not really customizing the visual, but it's adding something to the boxes. So for this one, we're going to look down here at this map. When I hover over a spot on this map, what I did was price by state. So you can see this is more of a province, but let's go down here. Okay, the state of Minnesota, $17,549.90 the price. So we see the two pieces of information that are being given to that chart. That's what we created, the size of the dots by and what we gave for location. But maybe we want to add more information into that hover box so we know more about it. You know, how many did we sell? You know, whose territory is this or what territory is this? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the map. The first thing you need to make sure is that tooltips are turned on, and they usually are on automatically, but it helps to check. You can see down here it says tooltip on. So we're going to go back to this fields area for the visual, and we can see state is our location, price is what defines the size of our bubbles, and then we've got this tooltip section, and we can pull data fields there as well. So the two things I'm going to pull from this, I'm going to go ahead and pull from the table that we were using. I want to see what sales territory this is in, and I want to see the quantity. And again, because these are being treated like fields, I'm going to rename them so that they just have that consistent look and feel. Okay, and now when I hover over, I can see Minnesota, I see the price, I see the territory 4, and then it's 23 that we have sold within that state. So tooltips can come in handy if you're going to want some more information, but you don't necessarily want to have it on your visual. Okay, so we've made a lot of changes, and you can see how some things can get really minuscule. You can change things as far as, you know, the X and Y axes, or axes, I guess, on a chart. You can spend a lot of time. The problem people run into is, you know, they don't want to spend that same amount of time on every single visual. So Power BI does have something called a format painter. So when I've got this visual selected, maybe this is exactly how I want all my visuals to be formatted. So I've got this selected, and up here in the gray toolbar, I hit Format Painter. And then now when I hover over a visual, I have a little paintbrush. And I'm going to go ahead and click that. And you can see now this visual has been set up with the same options as that first visual. Now you can't go and copy it right away again. You do have to go back and select Format Painter again to copy it onto another visual. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Format Painter. I'm going to bring it down here. And then I'm going to do Format Painter again. Then I'm going to bring it here. And now all of my visuals have that same overall setup. One thing I will say is it does not change the text of your titles. So you can see that the title text remained the same, but we had already entered titles on these. Say we had not input titles and you copy it over, you're still not going to see a title, but the title option will be turned to on. So when you look at the visual, even though you might not see a title, the title would be turned to on and all the formatting would be there, but you would need to go in here and enter the title text. So it doesn't copy over text that you've entered, but it copies over the formatting options you've selected. So the last thing that I want to look at today is some formatting for these slicers. So these are a couple filters, and you notice I didn't apply any other formatting except for renaming the fields on them. They always default to this list with checkboxes where you can check one. And I mean, they work just fine, but I want to show you some of the formatting options with them. So let's go ahead and look at the options that are within the paint roller here, and we're going to start with this sales territory one. And the first thing is we're going to expand the general tab, and you can see that the orientation is vertical. If we switch this to horizontal, they look more like buttons. So they become buttons that you can then select to make those options just look a little different. Some people prefer the button to the list. I don't recommend it with long lists. So if you have, more than 10, that could get to be a lot of buttons somewhere on your report, but they can look like buttons. Go ahead and when you have more buttons than space, it does give you this nice little arrow that you can page over. For me, the button just seems as a way that it would be easier to select, so I always like to make sure I have enough space for the buttons, but to each their own on formatting. A couple other things that you can do within the paint roller here, and I'm going to go ahead. When you do have this, you can change outline colors, things like that. But selection controls are the other thing I want to look at, and this applies whether they're buttons or whether they are in a list with checkboxes. You can choose if you want it to be just single select where they can only choose one option ever, and it's just slider bars here. Multi-select with control, that means they have to hold the control button down to select multiple options. If you turn that off, then it's a lot easier. Let me unselect this here. Let's turn it off on this one so we can see it a little easier here. If we turn off, you can just easily click multiple options. You can clear that out. If you have it on, I know you guys can't see that I'm having to do it, but then to select each one of these, I do have to have that control button pressed. The other option is a select all option. And if you put that, it just has a select all here. I rarely use this because if you don't have anything selected, so you can see we don't have any salesperson selected, it is automatically select all. Once you start selecting people, you're obviously filtering it down, but to go back to all, if you just clear all your selections, you're back to the all, select all option. But if you like the select all to be there, you certainly can have it there. The other two things that I want to show you in these slicers are actually available within the visual itself. So you can see where I've got the visual selected and I'm hovering over it. Oops, here I accidentally selected one. You can see some different things popping up that we can select from. So this right now is a list with checkboxes. And on this arrow, it says it's a list, but I can change it to a drop down. So if I want my slicer to take up less space on my page, I'm going to go ahead and hit drop down. And now it's just a drop down box. So that's one way that you can take a slicer from taking, if you saw how long that list was, but now it's just one little box for me to go ahead and filter through. The other thing that you can add is you can add a search box within your slicers. So you see here we have a little ellipsis for more options. And if I select that and I hit search, now when I expand my list, I have a search box. That probably isn't that important on something like this where when I don't have anything input here, you can see all my salespeople, it's just one list. But if you decide to put a filter of like customer name and you want to be able to search through all your customers, or you have, a lot of employees, maybe you have 50 salespeople and you want to be able to search through that list, search box can definitely be helpful. So with slicers, those are the basic formatting options that I usually like to put out there. And I know we're getting to the end of our time here. So I just wanted to see, does anybody have any questions? Wonderful. Well, I thank you guys so much for spending some of your day with me today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.